Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I've mentioned a few times I don't like push-pull legs type splits, or actually split routines for the most part in general, and people are kind of curious why. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, as far as the push-pull legs, you know what? If you enjoy doing that, you're making good progress doing it, you're happy with the results you're getting, my opinion probably doesn't matter, does it? I mean, let's be honest here. My opinion doesn't matter because you know what? Splits actually are nothing more than opinion, anyways. Splits themselves, any sort of split routine, as long as you understand the reason most split routines exist is not for physical reasons. They're not superior in any way for your body. They're done for psychological reasons, for personal enjoyment, relieving boredom, things like that. That's the reason to split a routine. This idea that, well, it lets you focus more on a given body. Well, if you want to focus more on a given lift or body part, you should probably be training it every single day. That's what most of the data suggests is the best way to make something improve is to do it all the time. So the whole idea of a split to focus on something is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's the opposite of logic or reason. But the whole thing is splits are done in order to separate the body up. The problem is that they can produce inferior results. Now, someone might say, well, I know this person or that person or this YouTuber who they look better than you and they do a push-pull legs. Well, here's the question I would ask you. Do you think the fact that they do push-pull legs is the reason they look fantastic? I want you to really think about that. Do you think the way that they've psychologically chosen to organize their training on a day-to-day basis is the reason they look fantastic? Or do you think it's because of the amount of workload they do, their genetics, maybe their drug use, maybe their diet? Those are probably much, much bigger factors. And guys, I'm sorry about the sirens. I live in the city. It's just something I have to deal with. So, all right, get on through. All right. That's the reason they look that way. So people get these assumptions that because someone does something a certain way, that must be the reason. And be like, no, the guy probably has really impressive biceps because mom and dad blessed him with good bicep genetics. He probably does a shitload of curls and maybe does a lot of weighted chin-ups. That's probably the reason that person has great biceps. I want you to think on that. That's probably the reason. It has nothing to do with the fact that they do push-pull legs. And that should be hopefully common sense for most people when you understand it from that perspective. And here's the perspective I would ask. The guy would say, well, they look better than you do. Okay. Do you think I would look like them if I switched to push-pull legs? Do you think that that's what would happen, that I would just automatically look like they do? Of course not. Of course not. And neither will you. And that's the take-home message. They have individual strong body parts who look great because of their total weight training workload. And that's what it comes down to. We know that weekly volume is the most important stimulator for muscle growth. How much weekly workload a muscle is subjected to, how well it's recovering, muscle protein synthesis, all of that. Now the reality is training a muscle more frequently generally produces better muscle growth. All right, that's understood. And the problem we run into with organizing stuff, people get dogmatic and they organize things for reasons other than psychological. And here's the thing I would point out. I don't like the idea of push-pull legs because it neglects your lower body. Essentially, the way people do push-pull legs, they give half of their body 1 day out of 3. And they have the other 2 days out of 3 dedicated to just their upper body. Now, if you want to be an upper body specialist and that's what you care about more than overall strength and athleticism, fine. But admit that. Admit that you don't care about your lower body and you don't care about particularly being strong through everything. The reality is, if I tell people if they want to do push-pull splits, do a push-pull split. There's no need to separate legs out. Why? Because you're creating dogma for no reason. You're splitting your body up into a separate section like that without any reason for doing so. It's doing it just because. The reality is when you think about pushing and pulling, that should give you enough variation that you never repeat the same workout. People are usually doing splits because they get bored. So if you come in and you focus on pushing one day and pulling on another, what happens? You're running a completely different set of lifts every time you go to the gym. You're rotating through the two. That's actually better physiologically. And When you think about it, every single leg exercise is a push or a pull, is it not? Is a squat and a leg press not a push? Of course, it's a push exercise. Push also means it's somewhat anterior dominant, meaning the front side of the body gets more work. In this case, like when you push with anything, your chest and shoulders up here get more of the work. When you pull, your back gets more work. What's the same with the lower body? All sorts of various deadlifts and power cleans and things like that work your glutes and your hamstrings and everything more in your back, so they're posterior dominant. Whereas in squats, leg presses, all of that work the front side of your body more, just like other presses. So really, when you're doing push-pull, you're balancing the front half of your body with the back half of your body, obviously arms being inverted on that, biceps and triceps. That's actually what you're doing. And if you're wanting to split things up to some extent, that works a little better. Furthermore, because it allows you to think in the mindset of training your whole body every day, you're still essentially doing full body. And how so? Well, because if you're squatting, overhead pressing, benching, and all of that on your push days, you are getting secondary work to the posterior side of your body. So you are actually getting that frequency up so that the other part of your body gets its muscle protein synthesis re-sparked. Even though it's getting inferior work, it is getting some. And the same thing on your pulling days. Because if you're pulling and you're deadlifting and doing chin-ups work your chest a little bit, they work your triceps a little bit. That is documented with the data. Deadlifts work most of the muscles through the body. So your quads and things are getting some stimulation. So if you go to a push-pull and you're organizing things in that manner because you want to alleviate boredom and you want to let certain pieces of connective tissue get a little bit of a break each workout, and that's why you're rotating through them, it makes more sense, because actually a push and a pull, if the right exercises are selected, actually does train the entire body. In other words, your pull day will work your quads, it will work your chest, it will work your triceps. Your push day will still work your hamstrings, it'll still work your glutes, it will still work your back and your traps and things like that to some extent. So the posterior side will still get some work, it's just going to be lesser work. So when you think about it from the perspective of maintaining muscle protein synthesis all the time, which is important for drug-free guys, in other words, you don't want to go more than 2 or 3 days without a muscle in your body getting some degree of stimulation. Even if it's not getting the most, even if 1 day a week a given muscle only gets maximum stimulation, if every 2 or 3 days it's getting something, it will reinforce the training and re-stimulate some growth based upon the harder day that you're doing. So it makes more sense physiologically, if you're going to split it up to some sort of push-pull, to not do legs and to throw your leg work in. In other words, squatting and leg pressing on the push days, and various deadlifts, cleans, things like that on your pull days. It makes a lot more sense in regards to that for keeping total muscle protein synthesis turnover higher throughout the week to stimulate more overall muscle growth. So that's generally what I would recommend for that, and that's why I don't like push-pull legs. So again, the idea is that you can separate your routine out into different days to where you're not ever doing the same exercise 2 workouts in a row because you get bored with doing it that way, or again, you feel certain connective tissue maybe needs a bit of a break from time to time because you're doing a fair amount of volume, and that is a problem. People who are doing higher volume training oftentimes do run into issues with this. They do run into issues that's overuse of connective tissue from doing the same lift every single workout. In some cases, depending upon your volume, can become a recovery issue, and so people can split it up that way, but you're still essentially doing full body every time you train. In other words, because you're doing the big exercises on both days, a lot of the big exercises, even if they're different ones, you are giving at least some stimulation to every muscle in your body every time you're in the gym. And of course, smaller amounts of stimulation hitting some of those muscles again doesn't really particularly impact their recovery enough for it to matter. So again, push-pull is a way to do a split that still makes everything full body, because otherwise what you end up with a push-pull legs is that you end up with your legs and a lot of the big major muscle groups in your body only getting worked like once a week. Or even people who do it like in a 6-day rotation twice a week, and you're ended up dedicating far, far more of your time to half of your body and a lot more of the smaller muscles that maybe aren't capable of growing as much anyways. So you'll get a lot more overall size, strength, things like that if you mix it into a push-pull, which is, like I said, essentially still a full body in a way. It really is. And then you're also not stuck being as dogmatic in that same mindset of, since it's my push day or my leg day or whatever that day happens to be, that people sometimes don't want to do exercises that they might see as confusing as to where they split in there. It just lets it be less dogmatic, because dogma sometimes, from the way people split stuff up, can also cause them to perform fewer of the more effective exercises. And I've seen that happen quite a few times, and that can help reverse it. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.